The HOA plastered Thomas Alvey's name and address on a public delinquent sign, all because of a single missed payment he never even knew about. Behind it was Linda Gorham, a board president with a personal grudge and a taste for humiliation. But with the help of his law student niece and a fierce civil rights attorney, Thomas turned the tables in court. And just wait until you hear how this quiet man made the whole neighborhood rewrite the rules, and the ending that left justice carved in bronze. When Thomas Alvey first moved into Juniper Ridge, he thought he'd finally found peace. The small suburban neighborhood seemed tailor-made for a quiet life. Neatly trimmed hedges, golden retrievers on leashes, kids riding scooters in driveways. For a man in his late 50s recovering from a spinal injury and a career-ending fall down a stairwell at the school where he taught, it felt like a fresh start. He kept to himself mostly, gave piano lessons to a few local kids, and paid his dues, literally and figuratively. But what Thomas didn't know, and what nobody warned him about, was that the neighborhood's HOA wasn't just strict, it was territorial, and its board didn't operate like a governing body. It behaved more like a self-appointed social tribunal, ruled by its long-standing president, Linda Gorham. Linda was retired, sharp-tongued, and always dressed like she was headed to a press conference. Her background in real estate had earned her respect, but it was her love for control that kept her at the top of the HOA food chain. She thrived on order and punishment. The incident that sparked everything was painfully simple. Thomas had always paid his HOA fees online. After his injury, his routines depended on automation. Groceries scheduled, bills prepaid, reminders set. But the HOA had recently transitioned their billing system, and the portal Thomas used hadn't been updated properly. His $130 quarterly fee, it never left his account. He didn't know. No alert came, no email, no mailed statement, nothing. The board noticed the missed payment within days, but instead of notifying Thomas, they escalated. Quietly, deliberately. One morning, Thomas went for his usual walk to the mailbox and froze. A new sign had gone up at the community clubhouse, a whiteboard framed in wood, typically used to announce summer picnics or lawn care schedules. But this time it bore a different message. Notice of non-compliant residents, and beneath it, in bold red ink, were two lines. Thomas Alvey address, 312 Peach Blossom, DR, status, delinquent. His breath caught. For a moment, he thought it had to be a mistake, a prank. But no, his name was there, printed alongside a single accusation that now defined him in the eyes of anyone who walked by. That evening, he found the same message replicated in the neighborhood's email newsletter sent to every homeowner with the subject line, "Updated compliance concerns." The fallout was instant, and it was silent. Neighbors he'd exchanged small talk with no longer made eye contact. The mailman, once friendly, now rushed his route. Even a child he used to tutor, a bright third grader named Caleb, stopped coming. His mother sent a one-line text canceling future lessons, citing personal concerns. Thomas tried to breathe through it, to dismiss the feeling as paranoia, but every time he stepped outside, he felt the eyes, felt the weight of something unspoken hanging in the air like summer humidity. He wasn't just being overlooked, he was being judged, publicly. He reached out to the HOA with a calm email asking if there'd been an error. No response. He followed up. Still nothing. It wasn't just the sign. It was the silence. It was the intent. That night, Thomas sat on his porch long after the sun dipped behind the rooftops. His hands trembled as he held his coffee mug, though the air was still. He had spent his entire career shaping young minds, living honestly, and now, because of a technical hiccup and a ruthless board president, his reputation was unraveling without a word of explanation. He didn't know it yet, but the worst was still to come. Because the HOA hadn't just decided to label him, they'd decided to make an example out of him, and they weren't finished. Thomas tried to believe it was all a misunderstanding. He wrote polite emails, he left voicemails, he even filled out the HOA's formal complaint form, attaching screenshots from his bank's auto payment dashboard, trying to show that the missed fee wasn't intentional. Days passed, then weeks, not one word in return. When the monthly HOA meeting rolled around, he went in person, clutching a printed folder of records. The room was half full, mostly familiar faces he used to nod to at the mailbox or greet during morning walks. But something had shifted. People avoided his gaze. Whispers floated as he entered. A woman shifted her purse away from the seat next to her, forcing Thomas to find a spot in the back. At the front of the room, Linda Gorham presided like a judge. Her hair was pinned up, blazer immaculate, voice smooth as velvet, but cold as tile. When the time came to review residency compliance, she didn't mention Thomas by name at first. She just said, "We've had a troubling case of negligence," before reading a paragraph clearly pulled from the newsletter, one that included his name, address, and ongoing delinquency. She paused afterward, looked around the room with an amused raise of her brow, and added, "Let this be a reminder. We don't wait forever. Sometimes you have to set an example." There was no smirk. Not really. Just the ghost of one. Like the kind you give when you already know you've won. Thomas stood up. Quietly, respectfully, he raised a hand and said, "Excuse me, I'd like to clarify something." Linda looked at him. A board member beside her reached to lower the microphone. She didn't even flinch. "Mr. Alvey, you are not recognized to speak. You're in violation. Please sit." "I just want to explain." He tried again, voice tight but measured. And that was when she gave the signal. The security guard, just a local guy hired for HOA meetings, stepped forward, hand extended in practice calm. "Sir, we're going to need you to step outside." They walked him out like he was a threat. A man with a clipboard and a limp. A former teacher. A quiet neighbor. The next morning another sign appeared, this one on a stake hammered into the patch of grass near his mailbox. Same language, same bold red letters. Delinquent, non-compliant, HOA action pending. Thomas's heart pounded as he read it. The sign wasn't just a warning, it was a sentence. What he didn't know, yet, was that behind closed doors, board members were trading emails like school bullies, swapping jokes. They called him lazy, said he was milking that disability. One email read, "Might be time to stick a second notice on his porch. Maybe then he'll get the message." Another board member added, "He's quiet because he's hiding something. Watch. People like that always blow up eventually." But Thomas wasn't angry yet. Not fully, not then. He was hurt. He was humiliated, and it was working. The phone stopped ringing. His two remaining piano students' parents texted vague excuses about scheduling issues. A woman from his church dropped off a casserole without knocking and didn't return his wave when he saw her outside later that week. At the grocery store, the young cashier took one look at him, glanced at the pin on his shirt reading Mr. Alvey, music teacher, and handed him change without a word. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, none sharp enough to bleed, but all deep enough to bruise. He canceled a dental appointment, then his annual checkup, then his Tuesday tutoring session with a neighbor's daughter. When a friend called to invite him to dinner, he didn't pick up. He told himself he was just tired, but deep down, a seed had been planted. Maybe he really had done something wrong. By the third week, he began looking at rental listings in the next county over. Then the phone rang. It was his niece, Emily. Smart, fiercely loyal, and midway through her second year at Vanderbilt Law. She'd seen the newsletter. Someone had sent her a photo of the sign. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Uncle Tom," she said, "is this real?" He didn't answer right away. His voice cracked when he tried. She waited, like good lawyers do. Let the silence hang until it hurt. And then she said the words that cracked something open. "Uncle Tom, you're going to sue them." No anger, no tears, just certainty. A switch had been flipped, and suddenly Thomas wasn't alone anymore. The HOA didn't know it yet, but they'd just picked a fight with the wrong family. Emily didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, she connected Thomas with a civil rights attorney she admired from her university lectures. Carla Menendez, a formidable litigator known for taking on municipalities and HOAs that crossed legal lines. Carla had a reputation, not just for being sharp, but surgical. And when Thomas handed her a folder containing the photos of the signs, screenshots from the newsletter, and a timeline of everything he'd endured, she didn't flinch. She read in silence for a few minutes. Then she closed the file, looked at him across the table, and said with careful control, "We're going to hold them accountable, every single one of them." From that moment, the case was no longer about HOA dues. It was about dignity, due process, and defamation. Carla's team began assembling the suit with the precision of a forensic team. First came the basics, financial records confirming Thomas had tried to pay. Then the emails, automated payment receipts, a timeline of unanswered inquiries, certified mail logs, of which there were none. The HOA had never issued a single formal warning. No certified letters, no phone calls, no grace period. What they had done was public, immediate, humiliating. But what elevated the case from civil nuisance to legal firestorm was motive. During discovery, Carla subpoenaed the HOA's internal communications. The board fought it, stalled, claimed the emails were informal. The judge overruled. When the documents came through, they read like a script, ugly, petty, and damning. One thread, started by Linda Gorham herself, referred to Thomas as a serial excuse maker and suggested that public shaming sends a clearer message than another reminder. Another board member replied, "At least folks are finally paying attention to compliance. Maybe we should keep the sign up a while longer." But it got worse. In a message dated months before the incident, Linda casually mentioned that Thomas had outbid her friend on a nearby property the year prior. "Still bitter," she wrote, adding a laughing emoji. Then, "If he can afford that house, he can afford his dues. Let's test him." That line broke the case wide open. Because it wasn't just negligence anymore. It was targeted malice. When the lawsuit was officially filed, it made ripples. When a local news anchor picked up the story, "Retired teacher smeared by HOA over glitched payment," it made waves. And when Carla publicly released excerpts from the board's emails, the case caught fire. National outlets picked it up. HOA abuse stories always hit a nerve, but this one struck deeper. It had everything: abuse of power, personal vendetta, and a quietly suffering underdog who had kept his composure while being dragged through the mud. Court was standing room only. Linda walked in wearing her usual pristine blazer, but the confidence was gone. Cameras followed her every step. During cross-examination, Carla read the email aloud, the one with the line, "Let's test him." The courtroom held its breath. Linda's response? A pause, a stammer, a glance to her attorney, then a carefully rehearsed line. "I don't recall writing that." But the jury didn't buy it. Neither did the room. Her voice cracked on redirect. Her hands trembled slightly as she rearranged her notes. The mask, so carefully maintained during her reign on the HOA board, was slipping. And just behind the prosecution's table, Thomas sat still, back straight, hands folded in his lap. He didn't smile. He didn't shake his head. He wasn't there for revenge. He was there for something more permanent, something the signs had tried to take from him: his name. And this time, the whole room knew exactly who Thomas Alvey was. The deliberation didn't drag on. After a 2-week trial and a mountain of evidence that left the jury visibly stunned at times, the verdict came in just before lunch on a Friday. The courtroom was nearly silent when the foreperson rose. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Thomas Alvey, on all counts." The ruling was clear and decisive: defamation, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The jury awarded Thomas $275,000 in damages, compensation for lost income, emotional trauma, and legal fees. But even more significant than the number was the clarity of the message it sent. This never should have happened. But the victory didn't end there. The judge, stern and meticulous, took an additional step. In his ruling, he issued a standing order that no HOA in the county could post identifying disciplinary notices in public view without first following strict due process, verified communication attempts, a minimum 60-day resolution window, and private arbitration before any external actions. He called the HOA's behavior reckless, vindictive, and a misuse of community trust. As for Linda Gorham, she barely looked up when the ruling was read. Her attorney patted her on the arm, but there was no rally left in her. The week after the verdict, the HOA board held a special session. More than 60 residents attended, many of them standing shoulder to shoulder in the back of the room. When the vote to remove Linda from her position was called, not a single hand went up in her defense. She stepped down the next morning, quietly, no press release, no goodbyes. And in the weeks that followed, the HOA bylaws were rewritten from the ground up. The new board, led by a younger couple with backgrounds in public service and nonprofit mediation, brought in transparency rules, accessible complaint processes, and mandatory resident review periods before any disciplinary actions. But the most noticeable change wasn't in the paperwork, it was in the clubhouse. Where that original sign had once hung, white background, red letters, public shame, now sat a modest bronze plaque beside the entrance. No fanfare, no headline, just one line etched into the metal, simple and clear. No resident shall be publicly identified without due process. That line had been written by Emily. Thomas saw it the first time a week after the new board was sworn in. He ran his hand lightly across the surface, then stepped back and read it again. There were no cameras this time, no news crews, just him, the breeze, and the echo of quiet justice. He didn't move. He never did. The man they tried to shame stayed put. Same house, same porch, same coffee mug in the mornings. The difference now? His neighbors waved again. The kids came back for piano lessons. The grocer called him Mr. Alvey, with a smile. Each month, when he passed the clubhouse on his walks, he didn't look away. Because the sign was gone, but its lesson remained, and so did he.